The Price of Vengeance. This is a story about the devastating cost of a lie. What would you do if your most intimate betrayal became terrifyingly public? This is not just a story of infidelity. It is a tale of power, legacy, and the devastating consequences of underestimating a woman who has nothing to lose. When billionaire media heiress Victoria Sterling discovered her husband's affair, she didn't just get angry. She got even. She took the brazen selfie of the mistress, taken in the sanctity of her own bedroom, and turned it into a weapon. This is the story of how a single photograph became a declaration of war, splashed on the front page of a newspaper she owned, shattering a family and exposing a world of secrets far darker than a simple romance. Subscribe if you believe the truth always comes to light. The Sterling penthouse on Fifth Avenue wasn't just a home. It was a museum of a dynasty. Spanning the top 2 floors of a limestone monolith, its floor-to-ceiling windows offered a bird's-eye view of New York City. Every object within its walls told a story of power. The imposing Jean-Michel Basquiat in the lobby, the soft glow of Baccarat crystal, the silent weight of antique rugs that muffled a century of secrets. This was the world Victoria Sterling was born into, a world her father, the formidable media titan Richard Sterling, had built and entrusted to her. She was the guardian of his legacy, especially of the Metropolitan Times, a newspaper that could make or break careers with a single headline. At 48, Victoria was as elegant and formidable as her surroundings. She had her father's sharp intellect and her mother's classic, serene beauty. She ran the Sterling Media Group with a firm hand, perched atop a carefully curated masterpiece of board meetings, charity galas, and quiet evenings with her husband of 20 years, Leo Harrison. Leo was, by all accounts, the perfect complement to her. A self-made man, a celebrated architect whose sleek, innovative designs had reshaped skylines. He possessed a charm that could disarm the most cynical journalist. He was the warm, approachable half of their power couple. His easy smile, a perfect counterpoint to Victoria's reserved grace. Theirs was a marriage admired, envied, and believed to be unbreakable. The first crack in this perfect facade appeared not with a bang, but with a buzz. It was a Tuesday night. Victoria was in her private study, a room paneled in dark cherry wood, reviewing the final proofs of the Metropolitan Times' weekend edition. The city lights twinkled below, a scattered carpet of diamonds. Her phone, face down on the polished mahogany desk, vibrated softly. An Instagram notification. She rarely checked it, as her social media presence was a carefully managed corporate affair. This, however, was a direct message from a name she vaguely recognized. A younger socialite. Someone on the periphery of her circle. The message was brief, almost apologetic. Victoria, I'm so sorry to be the one to send you this. I just thought you should know. Below the text was a screenshot. For a moment, Victoria's mind couldn't process what she was seeing. The image was grainy, clearly taken with a phone in low light. But the setting was as familiar to her as her own reflection. It was her bedroom. The custom-made headboard, crafted from reclaimed wood from a French vineyard. It was unmistakable. So was the faint outline of the Calder mobile that hung near the window, a gift from Leo on their 15th anniversary. But it was the subject of the photo that made the air leave her lungs. A young woman, someone Victoria had never seen before, was propped against her pillows. She was beautiful in a sharp, modern way, with jet black hair and a defiant pout. She wore nothing but Leo's favorite cashmere V-neck sweater, the gray one Victoria had bought him in Scotland. The woman was holding a phone, taking a mirror selfie. Her eyes in the reflection gleamed with a triumphant glow. The caption on the original post, visible at the bottom of the screenshot, was 4 simple words. Where I belong. The name of the account was Chloe Vance. The world tilted. The cherry panels of the walls seemed to close in. The air grew thick and heavy. Every breath was a struggle. Victoria's first instinct was a wave of pure, visceral pain. The betrayal was absolute. This wasn't just an affair in some anonymous hotel room. This was a desecration, an invasion. This woman, this stranger, had been in her bed, in her home, touching her things, breathing her air. And Leo? Leo had allowed it. He had brought this into their sanctuary. The pain was quickly followed by a cold, clarifying anger. It was an inherited trait, the sterling fury. Her father had been famous for it. A quiet, terrifying rage that could dismantle a man's career in a single, chilling sentence. Victoria had always kept that part of herself locked away, deeming it too brutal for her carefully constructed life. Now she felt it uncoil in her chest like a snake. She stood. Her movements were rigid. She walked to the vast window and looked out at the city that her family, for generations, had helped inform and shape. The Metropolitan Times was more than a business. It was an instrument of power. Her father had used it to champion causes, expose corruption, and, when necessary, settle scores. He had once told her, "Victoria, information is the only currency that matters, and we own the bank." Her mind, honed by years of corporate strategy and crisis management, began to work. The shock receded, replaced by a chilling clarity. Tears were a luxury she could not afford. A messy private divorce was the conventional path. Lawyers, settlements, quiet shame. It was what was expected of women in her position. Hide the humiliation, preserve a dignified facade. But the sheer audacity of the act demanded a different response. The photograph wasn't a mistake. It was a challenge. A deliberate act of aggression from a mistress who clearly felt secure, and from a husband who had become careless. Arrogant. They had underestimated her. They had mistaken her quiet dignity for weakness. They had forgotten who she was. She was not just a wife. She was Victoria Sterling. And this was her city. Her newspaper. She turned away from the window. Her decision was made. The snake of rage was now fully awake, its cold fire spreading through her veins. This would not be a private matter. A private humiliation demanded a public reckoning. They had brought the battle into her home. She would fight it on her own turf. She picked up her personal phone, the one with the direct, encrypted line to the editor-in-chief of the Metropolitan Times, a man named David Chen, whom she trusted implicitly. He was an old-school journalist, nearing retirement, who had worked for her father for 30 years. He answered on the second ring, his voice tired. "Victoria, is everything all right?" "It's late." Victoria's voice was eerily calm, devoid of any emotion. "David, I need you to stop the presses." There was a pause. Stopping the presses was the nuclear option in their world, an act reserved for declarations of war or the death of a president. "What? The weekend edition is already rolling. It would cost a fortune. What in God's name happened?" Victoria went back to her desk and forwarded the screenshot to her encrypted email. "I'm sending you a file now. I have your new front page." "Your new—" "Victoria, what are you talking about?" The headline. "David," she said, her voice dropping to an icy whisper. "I want it to read, Bedroom Story. Leo Harrison's mistress feels right at home." There was a deep silence on the other end of the line. David Chen was likely looking at the image on his screen, the one that showed his boss's intimate bedroom, a woman he respected and admired, defiled by a stranger. He was a journalist. but he was also a friend. "Victoria. My God," he stammered. "You can't. Think about what you're doing. Think about your family. Think about Leo's reputation. Your reputation." "I am thinking about it," she replied, the coldness in her voice absolute. "I'm thinking about the fact that my husband's reputation seems to be a matter of public record. So let's make it official. This is madness," he exhaled. "It's professional suicide. It's personal. It became personal when she took a photo in my bedroom." "David," Victoria said, her tone leaving no room for discussion. "My father hired you because you have ink in your veins and steel in your spine. He trusted you to follow a story to its conclusion. This is the story. Are you going to run it, or do I need to call someone who will?" The threat hung in the air, unspoken but understood. He knew she meant business. He let out a long, defeated sigh. "God help us all, Victoria. God help you. God has nothing to do with this," Victoria said, before ending the call. She sat in the silence of her study. The city lights, a cold and distant audience. She felt strangely empty, as if she had carved out the part of her that felt pain and only left purpose. Leo was at a business dinner downtown. He would return home in an hour or two, smelling of expensive wine and feigned sincerity. He would kiss her on the cheek and tell her he missed her. And in the morning, he, along with 8 million New Yorkers, would wake up to their new reality. He would discover that he had not only broken his wife's heart, he had started a war with a queen, and she was about to burn his kingdom to the ground. The first firestorm. Do you think a revenge so public can ever be justified? Tell us what you think in the comments. Dawn broke over New York with a deceptive serenity, the sky a soft wash of gray and pink. But in the streets below, a firestorm was brewing. It started as a ripple, with the morning deliveries of the Metropolitan Times. The truck drivers, accustomed to headlines about politics or finance, gasped. Kiosk owners squinted, then read the headline again. Their eyes widened in disbelief. By 6 in the morning, the city was awake and buzzing. The front page was a work of brutal simplicity. There, in raw color, was the photo of Chloe Vance. It was larger and clearer than the screenshot, as the Metropolitan Times' digital forensics team had worked through the night to enhance its quality. Every detail was crisp, the smug triumph in her eyes, the distinctive grain of the wooden headboard, the gray cashmere sweater that was so obviously a man's. And the headline, in the Metropolitan Times' bold, authoritative font. "Bedroom story. Leo Harrison's mistress feels right at home." There was no subheadline, no long article, just the photo, the headline, and a short, devastatingly factual caption. Chloe Vance, 28, art gallery curator, photographed in the Fifth Avenue marital bedroom of celebrated architect Leo Harrison and his wife, Sterling Media Group CEO Victoria Sterling. It was a nuclear bomb detonated in the heart of the city's elite. By 7 in the morning, it was all anyone was talking about. In stock exchanges and coffee shops, in whispered conversations in the back of town cars, the image was passed from phone to phone. The story was retold with a mixture of horror and glee. The sheer, audacious cruelty was breathtaking. It wasn't just journalism. It was vengeance, served cold and on paper. Leo Harrison woke up at 7:15 a.m. He had arrived home late, slipping into the guest room, as he often did after a late dinner, to avoid waking Victoria. He showered, put on one of his impeccably tailored suits, and walked out, expecting the quiet hum of his domestic life. The first sign that something was wrong was the silence. The apartment was deathly still. No smell of coffee, no sound of morning news. His phone, which he left charging on the hallway console, was lit up like a Christmas tree. Dozens of missed calls, a torrent of text messages. "Leo, what the hell is this? Call me!" His business partner. "Mr. Harrison, a statement is urgently needed." His public relations firm. "Leo, is this real? Your face is everywhere." A friend, confused. He walked into the kitchen. And there it was. A single copy of the Metropolitan Times, placed squarely in the center of the marble island. Victoria was nowhere to be seen. He stared at the front page, his mind refusing to connect the dots. He saw the photo. He saw Chloe. He saw his bedroom. He saw his name. And then he read the headline. The world fell out from under him. It was a physical sensation, a jolt in his stomach so violent he had to grab the edge of the counter to stay standing. The blood drained from his face. This was not possible. It was a nightmare, a prank, a hack. But he knew with a sickening certainty that it was real. Only one person could have orchestrated this. Only one person had the power, the access, and now, clearly, the motive. He stumbled backward, his breathing ragged. He thought of his conversation with Chloe. She had grown possessive, demanding more of his time, hinting that she wanted to go public. He dismissed it as emotional blackmail, something he could handle. He told her to be patient. Never in his wildest dreams did he imagine this. And the photo. He remembered her taking selfies that night, laughing about how good she looked in his sweater. He had been careless, intoxicated by her youth and his own arrogance. His phone rang again. It was his mother, her voice trembling with panic. "Leo, what's going on? The phone won't stop ringing." He couldn't answer. He hung up and finally went in search of Victoria. He found her in the formal living room, the one with the Basquiat and the view of Central Park. She was wearing a slate-gray, businesslike dress, her hair pulled back in a severe bun. She stood by the window, a tablet in her hand, scrolling calmly. She looked up as he entered, her eyes as cold and gray as her dress. "Victoria," he said, his voice raw, a primal whisper. "What have you done?" "I reported the news," she said, her tone even, almost conversational. "It's what we do, isn't it? The news." "You call this news?" he roared, finding his voice in a surge of fury. "You call this news? This is a public execution. You've destroyed me. You've destroyed us." "You're wrong," she said, setting the tablet down. "You destroyed us when you invited that creature into our bed. I'm simply cleaning up the mess." "You set fire to our lives for the whole world to see," he railed, his hands trembling. "My career is over. My reputation. What about our son? Did you even think about Luke?" At the mention of their son, a flicker of something, pain, regret, crossed her face, but it was gone as quickly as it came. "I am thinking about him," she said. "I am thinking about the legacy he will one day inherit, a legacy of strength, not of weakness and public humiliation at the hands of an unfaithful husband." "So you chose a different kind of humiliation, a bigger one?" he sneered, desperation making him cruel. "You think this makes you look strong? It makes you look like a bitter, vengeful shrew. Everyone is laughing at you, Victoria, the scorned wife who owns the newspaper." "Let them laugh," she retorted, unmoved. "They are not the ones who matter. The people who matter see this for what it is. A message that the Sterling House does not tolerate betrayal, not in its boardroom, and not in its bedroom." He stared at her, seeing for the first time in years the woman he had married. The quiet, understanding partner was gone. In her place was Richard Sterling's daughter, a woman forged in corporate fire. And he realized with a dawning horror that he had never truly known her. He had seen her power as an accessory to his own life, not as a weapon that could be turned against him. "I will sue you," he spat. "I'll take the newspaper for libel, for defamation." Victoria almost smiled. It was a terrifying sight. On what grounds, Leo? Is the photograph false? Is she not your mistress? Were you not in a relationship with her? Did she not take that photo in this house? Every word we printed is the truth, and the truth is an absolute defense. Our lawyers are, shall we say, prepared. He was trapped. Completely and utterly trapped. He had no defense. He had no recourse. She had used the truth as a guillotine. Meanwhile, across town, in a small, stylish but comparatively modest apartment in Tribeca, Chloe Vance was also waking up. Her phone was exploding, but with a different kind of message. Notifications from news sites, friend requests from thousands of strangers, vicious comments on her Instagram, which had somehow gone public. And then, a friend sent her a photo of the Metropolitan Times' front page. Her first reaction was a surge of pure, unadulterated triumph. She had done it. She had forced his hand. The world now knew she existed. She was no longer a secret. This was the first step. The public scandal. The inevitable divorce. And then Leo, free and unburdened, would come to her. She had won. But as she scrolled through the comments, a cold knot of dread began to form in her stomach. Homewrecker. Vile trash. Hope you enjoyed your 15 minutes. Stupid. The virulence was astonishing. She saw her own face, her smug expression everywhere, a symbol of brazen infidelity. She had wanted to be seen, but not like this. She had wanted to be the woman who won the powerful man, not the cheap whore who got caught in his bed. She had intended to control the narrative, maybe with a story leaked to a sympathetic gossip columnist. She had never anticipated this. This wasn't a controlled leak. This was a full-on carpet bombing. Victoria Sterling hadn't just exposed the affair. She had branded it. The final, most painful blow of the morning came from the other side of the country, at the University of California. Luke Harrison, a 22-year-old economics student, was walking to class when his friends showed him the headline on their phone. He saw his father's name. He saw the word mistress, and he saw a photo taken in his mother's bedroom. The world spun. The shame was instant and overwhelming. This was not some anonymous celebrity scandal. This was his family, his home. His mother, the most private and dignified person he knew, had done this. He fled to his dorm room, his heart pounding, and called her. "Mom," he said, his voice choked with a mixture of anger and anguish. "What did you do? Why would you do this?" Victoria, still in the living room with Leo, answered the call. Her steel composure finally cracked. Hearing her son's pain was the one thing that could pierce her armor. "Luke," she started, her voice softer. Everyone is seeing this. My friends are seeing this. They feel sorry for me. You put our family, our private pain, on the front page of a newspaper. He did this, Luke, she said, her voice hardening again as she looked at Leo. And you turned it into a circus, he yelled. Couldn't you have just divorced him? Why did you have to blow up our entire world? Before she could answer, he hung up. Victoria stood in silence, the sound of her son's accusation ringing in her ears. She looked at Leo, who was watching her with a kind of broken, bitter satisfaction. For the first time that morning, she felt the cost of her victory. She had won the battle, but the collateral damage was immense, and she was beginning to suspect that the war was far from over. This single act of vengeance had set in motion a chain of events she could no longer control. The true war. Do you think money can buy happiness? Share your opinion in the comments below. The days following the publication were a slow-motion car crash. The story had a life of its own now, a ravenous entity that fed on speculation and schadenfreude. Rival newspapers and gossip sites dug deeper, unearthing every detail they could on the curator and the architect. Chloe Vance's past was dissected, her social media mined for any clue to her relationship with Leo. Leo, for his part, became a pariah. He was forced to take an indefinite leave of absence from his own firm, Harrison and Associates. The board, facing pressure from clients who didn't want their multi-million-dollar projects associated with such a sordid scandal, had all but pushed him out. He was radioactive. Leo retreated to a friend's empty downtown apartment, a ghost in his own life. The calls he made were to lawyers, discussing the grim mechanics of a divorce that was now a certainty. Every conversation was a reminder of what he had lost: his wife, his son's respect, his career, and, as he was quickly discovering, his financial independence. Victoria, in contrast, presented a facade of unbreakable strength. She went to her office at the Sterling Media Group every day. She attended every meeting and made every decision with her usual incisive intelligence. Her staff watched her with a mixture of awe and fear. They had always respected her, but now she seemed almost mythical, a figure out of corporate folklore. The woman who had put her own unfaithful husband on the front page. No one dared to cross her, but beneath the surface, Victoria was navigating a private hell. Her son, Luke, refused to speak to either her or Leo. Her nights were sleepless, the silence of the vast penthouse a constant reminder of her fractured family. The victory felt hollow, the vengeance a bitter ash in her mouth. The first major twist, the one that changed the entire game, came from an unlikely source: Mark O'Connell, the longtime general counsel for the Sterling family. He was a quiet, meticulous man in his 60s, more of a confidant than a simple lawyer. He had been a friend of Victoria's father and had watched her grow up. He requested an urgent, off-the-record meeting a week after the headline. He met her not at the office, but in the quiet, echoing grandeur of the Metropolitan Museum of Art. "Victoria," he began, his face grim, as they stood before a Rembrandt portrait. "The scandal has created unforeseen ripples. Your decision, while bold, has drawn a lot of attention to Leo's financial affairs." "And what about them?" Victoria asked, her attention still on the painting. "Standard procedure in a high-profile divorce is a full disclosure of assets," Mark said. "I've started the preliminary work, and I found something troubling. Very troubling. Leo co-founded his firm with a substantial initial investment. We all thought it was from his early successes. It wasn't. The seed money, nearly $10 million, came from an offshore entity registered in the Cayman Islands, Orion Holdings." Victoria frowned. "I don't know it." "Neither did I," Mark said gravely. "Because it's a shell company, and the money wasn't his. He was heavily leveraged, and worse. For the past 5 years, he's been using his shares in Harrison and Associates, shares that are community property, by the way, as collateral on a series of increasingly desperate loans from the same entity." Victoria's blood ran cold. "Loans for what?" "That's the mystery. His firm is successful. There's no business reason for it. This is a personal debt, and he has defaulted on the most recent payment." Mark paused, letting the weight of his next words sink in. "Whoever Orion Holdings is, they don't just own a piece of his firm. With this default, they effectively own him. And by extension, they have a claim on half of your marital assets tied to his company." The affair, the betrayal. They suddenly seemed like a child's squabble in comparison to this. This was about the Sterling legacy. This was a threat to the empire her father had built. "Find out who is behind Orion Holdings," Victoria ordered, her voice low and dangerous. "Use every resource we have. The Metropolitan Times' investigative team, private investigators, whatever it takes." As Victoria's team began to delve into the murky world of offshore finance, another player made a move. Chloe Vance, now unemployed and infamous, realized her victimization could be an asset. Her initial attempts to sell a tell-all story had been met with lukewarm offers. Yesterday's news. She needed new leverage, and she realized she might have it. During her time with Leo, he had often been careless, taking calls and leaving documents on his desk in the apartment he kept for their trysts. He had been stressed, worried, speaking in low tones about meeting his obligations and the pressure from Orion. At the time, she had paid it little mind. Now, those fragments of conversation seemed vital. She also remembered seeing a name on some of his correspondence, Alistair Fox. Alistair Fox. The name was a jolt to Victoria when her investigators brought it up a few days later. Fox was a ruthless British private equity magnate, a corporate raider known for hostile takeovers. He was also Victoria's primary rival, the owner of a competing media conglomerate who had been trying to buy the Metropolitan Times for years. Her father had despised him, calling him a vulture who mistakes destruction for creation. The pieces began to fall into place with terrifying speed. Alistair Fox was the money and the power behind Orion Holdings. This wasn't just a business loan. It was a long, patient, and absolutely diabolical plan. Fox had seeded Leo's company from the very beginning, making him dependent. He had waited for the perfect moment of vulnerability to call in the debt. He wasn't just trying to bankrupt Leo. He was trying to get leverage over Victoria. By controlling her husband's debt, he controlled a significant marital asset. In the resulting divorce, he could claim a stake in the Sterling Media Group itself, or at the very least, force an asset sale. The affair was not the cause of the crisis. It was simply the trigger that undived the trap. Leo had not just been a lovesick fool. He had been a pawn in a billionaire's chess game. His affair with Chloe, his carelessness, his public disgrace. It was all the perfect storm that Fox had been waiting for. Victoria felt a surge of rage so profound it almost blinded her. She had been manipulated. Everyone had. Leo, for all his sins, was a fly caught in a web he couldn't comprehend. Chloe was a pawn, and she, Victoria, was the ultimate prize. Fox's plan was brilliant in its cruelty. He had used her own marriage as a weapon against her. She needed to talk to the one person who might have seen the gears of this machine up close. She needed to talk to Chloe Vance. The meeting was arranged through back channels in the empty, echoing space of a closed restaurant in the Tribeca neighborhood that Victoria owned. It was neutral, private ground. Chloe arrived looking nervous but defiant. The past few weeks had stripped her of her smug confidence, replacing it with a hard-edged caution. Victoria wasted no time with pleasantries. She sat in a booth, a solitary glass of water in front of her. "You thought you were playing Leo?" Victoria began, her voice calm. "You were wrong. You were both being played." "By you mean?" Chloe sneered. "Your actions were a response to mine," Victoria stated coolly. "You were checkers. Now I'm in a game of chess. And I find you are, a pawn on my side of the board. I need to know everything Leo said about Alistair Fox and Orion Holdings." Chloe's eyes widened slightly at the mention of the name. She had leverage, after all. "What's in it for me?" she asked, her voice regaining some of its old confidence. "My reputation is destroyed. I can't get a job. You owe me something." "I owe you nothing," Victoria countered, her gaze unwavering. "You had a transactional relationship with my husband. Now you're going to have one with me. You give me the information I need. Every detail, every name, every whisper you overheard. In exchange, I will give you a new life." Chloe hesitated. "What kind of new life?" $250,000 transferred to an account of your choosing, a first-class one-way ticket to any city in the world, and a clean slate. In exchange, You will sign a non-disclosure agreement so ironclad that if you ever utter the names Sterling, Harrison, or Fox again, you will be left with not a cent for the rest of your life, and you will vanish. You came into my world looking for a payoff. This is it. Take the deal or walk away with nothing and face Alistair Fox's displeasure alone. I assure you, my public vengeance is much kinder than his private version." Chloe looked at the woman across the table. She saw no trace of the scorned wife from the tabloids. She saw a commander, a strategist offering a brutal but clean way out of a war she was not equipped to fight. The choice was obvious. For the next hour, Chloe talked. She recounted hushed phone calls, panicked meetings Leo had, and his growing terror of his investor. She confirmed that Leo's relationship with Fox was one of absolute fear. He was a puppet whose strings had just been cut. When Chloe left, with the promise of a new life in Florence and $250,000, Victoria sat alone in the silent restaurant. She now had the complete picture: her husband's infidelity, her own spectacular vengeance, the public scandal. It was all just the first act. The real war was against Alistair Fox, a man who had tried to use her family's private pain for his corporate gain. She had unleashed a media firestorm to punish her husband. Now she would have to harness that same power to save her empire. The front page of the Metropolitan Times had been her weapon of vengeance. Now it would become her shield and her sword. The story hadn't ended. It had just begun. Checkmate in the boardroom. Do you think that in the world of business, the truth is the most powerful weapon? Comment your opinion below. The battle lines were drawn, etched not in sand, but in the cold, hard currency of power and reputation. On one side was Alistair Fox, a predator armed with financial leverage, legions of ruthless lawyers, and a complete lack of scruples. On the other was Victoria Sterling, armed with the unvarnished truth, a media empire, and a cold, calculated fury that had been sharpened to a razor's edge by betrayal. The battleground was no longer the court of public opinion, where gossip reigned. It had moved to the unforgiving arena of corporate warfare. Victoria, guided by the meticulous Mark O'Connell and her top investigative reporter at the Metropolitan Times, a tenacious man named Ben Carter, worked with a chilling efficiency that left her team in awe. Chloe Vance's testimony had provided the human narrative, a vivid tapestry of Leo's growing fear and desperation. The forensic financial analysis team, working in a secure, locked-down section of the Sterling Media Group building, had painstakingly traced the flow of money from Fox's known entities through a labyrinth of shell companies in Panama, the Cayman Islands, and Liechtenstein. The trail always, inevitably, led back to Orion Holdings. They had the evidence, a clear and damning pattern of predatory lending and corporate espionage, designed for one audacious purpose: to seize control of Leo Harrison's assets and, through them, launch a Trojan horse attack on the Sterling Media Group itself. The trap Fox had so brilliantly set was that any conventional move Victoria made would result in his victory. If she discreetly paid off Leo's monumental debt to protect the sanctity of their marital assets, Fox would walk away with an astounding profit, rewarding his malice. If she allowed Leo's company and its associated debts to fall to Fox in the divorce proceedings, Fox would become a significant minority power in her life, a cancerous presence she could never excise, potentially forcing a sale of Sterling Media Group assets to satisfy his claims. He had built what he believed to be a perfect checkmate, but Alistair Fox, like Leo before him, had made a critical and fatal error. He had fundamentally misunderstood his opponent. He saw Victoria as an heiress, a socialite CEO who had inherited her power. He didn't see her as her father's daughter, a born fighter who understood the fundamental Sterling doctrine. The best defense is a devastating and overwhelming offense. She convened her war council in her father's old study, a room she had rarely used, but that felt appropriate for the gravity of their situation. The air smelled of old leather and aged paper. Mark O'Connell, David Chen, and Ben Carter sat around the heavy mahogany table, looking at the mountain of evidence before them. "We have two options," Victoria stated, her voice resonating with a newfound authority. She didn't pace. She stood at the head of the table, commanding the room. "Option 1 is the lawyer's path. We fight Fox in the dark alleyways he loves. We file motions, countersuits. It will be a long, bloody, private war of attrition. He has the resources to drag it out for years, bleeding us with legal fees. In the process, my family's name, Leo's profound stupidity, and the details of our entire life will be unearthed and dissected in depositions. He wants that war of inches. He would win." She paused, her gaze sweeping over each man, ensuring she had their absolute attention. "Option 2, she continued with a dangerous glint in her eyes, is the Sterling way. Ben Carter, the veteran editor who had been so horrified by her initial order weeks ago, now looked at her with a grim, almost fearful respect. "You want to publish?" he said. It wasn't a question. "Everything," Victoria confirmed. "Every last detail, but not as a sordid follow-up to the affair. We frame it for what it truly is. A major financial investigation. A public service." The headline would read something like, "The Fox's Trap. How British Raider. Alistair Fox uses predatory debt to weaponize private lives." We expose the entire mechanism. The shell companies. The systematic targeting of Leo as a middleman. The ultimate goal of infiltrating this company. We lay it all out for the world to see. The silence that followed was heavy with risk. Mark O'Connell, always the voice of caution, finally broke it. "Victoria, with all due respect, this is madness. He will sue us into oblivion. He is not Leo Harrison. He has armies of lawyers who specialize in this. They will very convincingly claim this is a personal vendetta, that you are abusing your media empire to fight your divorce battles in public. We could get tied up in litigation that could genuinely threaten the newspaper." Ben Carter, the reporter, chimed in. "He's right, Victoria. From a journalistic standpoint, we have to be bulletproof. Fox will use every tool at his disposal to discredit us, to paint you as a deranged, scorned woman. He will attack the source. You." Victoria listened patiently, nodding. "You are both absolutely right. He will do all of those things. And that is precisely why this will work," she said, her logic sharp and cold. "You are looking at the chessboard as it stands. I am telling you how to flip the entire table over. He wants to fight me in the shadows. I will force him to fight me in the daylight. When he sues us, he won't be suing a scorned wife. He will be suing the Metropolitan Times for publishing a meticulously documented piece of investigative journalism. He will have to prove in an open court that his financial dealings are legitimate. He will be subject to discovery. His entire empire, which has been built in the murky depths of offshore secrecy, will be dragged into the light, kicking and screaming. He is a predator that thrives in the dark. We are going to turn on every single spotlight in the Atlantic." It was an incredibly bold gambit. She was daring him to engage in a mutually assured destruction, knowing he had far more to lose from transparency than she did. "There's one last piece," she concluded, her voice softening slightly. "The key piece. Leo." The men exchanged uneasy glances. Leo was a public disgrace, a pariah. "His testimony is the human heart of this financial story," Victoria explained. "He corroborates everything. We have the what, but he provides the how and the why. I need a signed affidavit from him. A full and official confession of his dealings with Fox. And you think he'll just give it to you? Mark asked, incredulous. After you put him on the world stage as an adulterer? I don't know, Victoria admitted, with a quiet honesty. But he is my son's father, and he is a man who has lost everything. The one thing he may still have a desire to reclaim is a piece of his dignity. I'm going to offer him that chance. Doing something she never thought she'd do again, Victoria went to see him. The doorman of the sterile glass and steel building downtown looked at her with pity as he let her go up. The apartment Leo was borrowing was a minimalist nightmare of white walls and chrome furniture, a place with no history and no soul. It smelled of stale air and defeat. She found him in the living room, staring out the window. He was a shadow of his former self. The swaggering charisma was gone, replaced by a hollow-eyed emptiness. He had lost weight, and his expensive suit hung on him, making him look like a child playing dress-up. He turned as she entered, his expression devoid of the anger of their last confrontation. It was worse. It was apathy. Have you come to inspect the ruins? His voice was a dry whisper. I've come to offer you an option, she said, omitting any pleasantries. She didn't sit down. She placed a thick legal file on the glass coffee table between them. I know everything, Leo. About Alistair Fox, Orion Holdings, the loans, the trap he set for you, for us. She watched as he listened, his expression shifting through a kaleidoscope of emotions, from tired confusion to dawning horror, and finally, to a pathetic, impotent flash of rage. He sank into the couch, his head in his hands. That bastard, he whispered, the words muffled. All of it. He was manipulating me from the beginning. Yes, Victoria said, her voice clinical, not accusatory. He manipulated all of us, and now I'm going to end the game. I'm preparing a story for the Metropolitan Times. We're going to publish everything. Leo looked up, his eyes wide with disbelief. You're insane. He will destroy you. He's not like me, Victoria. He's a killer. I'm aware, she said. But the story is infinitely stronger with your cooperation. I need your voice. Your testimony will be the nail in his coffin. She slid a single document and a pen across the table. I need you to sign this affidavit, detailing everything, every conversation, every threat, every payment. He stared at the pen as if it were a snake. A bitter, broken laugh escaped his lips. And why in God's name would I do that? To help you? The woman who publicly annihilated me? You took my life and set fire to it. I did, she acknowledged. Her voice softened for the first time. Not with pity, but with a cold, hard truth. I took the life you were living. Now I am offering you a chance to build a new one. At this moment, your legacy, the story that will be told to our grandchildren, is that of a fool and a cheater who was brought down by a cheap affair. She tapped the affidavit. This is your one and only chance to change that narrative. You can be the man who was duped and targeted, but who, in the end, did the right thing. The man who stood up and helped expose a true villain to protect his family. You can be a tragic but brave figure. She pushed the pen closer to him. Or you can be the coward who hid in a borrowed apartment while his wife fought the dragon he invited into their lives. The choice is yours, Leo. You get to define how you will be remembered. This is the last and most important choice you will ever have. He looked from the pen to her face, searching her eyes. He saw no lingering affection, but he saw no malice either. He saw a general giving a soldier a chance to die honorably on the battlefield, instead of by a firing squad. With a trembling hand, he picked up the pen. The legacy of the Millers. Do you believe that forgiveness is possible after such a betrayal? Comment your opinion. 3 days later, The Sunday edition of the Metropolitan Times landed on doorsteps with a perceptible thud. The headline was a masterpiece of declarative journalism. Consuming the top half of the front page, The Fox's Trap, an investigation into predatory finance, corporate espionage, and the weaponization of private lives. The story that followed was a tour de force, a multi-page, meticulously researched and comprehensive exposé, complete with flowcharts mapping Fox's shell companies, damning excerpts from his aggressive loan agreements, and incisive sidebars about his long history as a corporate raider. And at its heart, displayed with devastating clarity, was a scanned copy of Leo Harrison's full and signed affidavit. The effect was instantaneous and seismic. It detonated in newsrooms and boardrooms from New York to London and Hong Kong. The story was picked up globally, not as a piece of society gossip, but as a major financial bombshell. Fox's investors, who had long turned a blind eye to his methods, were terrified. Regulators in both the US and the UK, who had long been suspicious, suddenly had the public mandate and hard evidence to open formal, wide-ranging investigations. Fox, as predicted, came out swinging. His public relations machine went into overdrive. He filed a staggering billion-dollar lawsuit against the Metropolitan Times for defamation. He appeared on a rival news channel, his face a mask of indignation, calling Victoria a deranged and vengeful woman who was abusing her father's newspaper to settle a personal score. It was a fatal miscalculation. Victoria, by publishing Leo's confession alongside the hard data, had brilliantly framed the narrative. She was not just a wife seeking revenge. She was a CEO defending her company against a documented hostile attack. Fox's angry denials made him look guilty. His lawsuit, a desperate attempt to silence the truth. The spotlight she had turned on was too bright. Fox's lawsuit failed at the pre-trial stage, as the discovery process, which he had unwittingly initiated, began to unearth even more of his sordid dealings. His partners and investors, terrified by the legal and financial exposure, began to abandon him in droves. His empire, built on shadows and fear, could not stand up to the harsh glare of public scrutiny. It began to crumble, not in a single collapse, but in a cascade of failures. 6 months later, Alistair Fox was finished. He was forced to resign from his own firm under a cloud of scandal, liquidating personal and corporate assets to cover his spiraling legal fees and settle with furious investors. He was a ruined man, a king deposed. The divorce between Victoria and Leo proceeded with a quiet, somber dignity. There was little left to fight over. Leo, as part of his cooperation, had voluntarily given up his claims on the Sterling Media Group and most of their shared assets. He left New York without a word. A man disgraced, but free with enough capital to start again somewhere anonymous and quiet. Victoria was left alone at the helm of her empire, more powerful and respected than ever. She had faced the ultimate personal betrayal and a catastrophic corporate threat, and she had emerged victorious. But the victory was not without its scars. Her marriage was a memory, her family indelibly fractured. One night, months later, as the first winter snow fell on the city, her son Luke called her. "I read all the articles, Mom." His voice was quiet but firm. "I had a professor in my corporate ethics class use it as a case study. I finally understand what you were doing, and why. I just wanted to say, I'm proud of you." Hot, unexpected tears welled up in Victoria's eyes for the first time since the ordeal began. They weren't tears of sadness or anger, but of a deep, painful relief. The only judgment that had truly mattered had been rendered in her favor. But I have to ask, Luke continued, with a genuine curiosity in his tone. That first front page, the one with Dad and her, was that part of the plan too? Was that the first move against Fox? Victoria looked out at the city lights, a brilliant kingdom she had fought so hard to protect. No, she admitted, her voice a soft, honest whisper. That wasn't strategy. That wasn't for the company. That wasn't for Fox. A small, sad, but resolute smile touched her lips. That was for me. She had won the war, saved her legacy, and in the end, reclaimed her son. The glass house had been shattered, but in its place, she had built a fortress of steel and ink, a throne of her own design, magnificent and painful. The story of Victoria Sterling is a chilling reminder that in the world of the powerful, love, business, and betrayal are often tragically intertwined. She took a moment of profound personal humiliation and forged it into a weapon, not just for vengeance, but for the very survival of her legacy. It forces us to ask, what would you do with that kind of power? When pushed to the absolute limit, would you choose quiet dignity or a spectacular, world-altering retribution? If this story of high-stakes drama and calculated justice captivated you, show your support by hitting that like button, and don't forget to subscribe.